Well, hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus, and I'm thankful for him because he continues to help me and guide me as I walk through my grief and loss over my daughter. My name is Tanya.
Hey, Tanya.
Would you also mind giving me my glasses in the seat next to you? I'm like, why can't I read it?
There you go.
All righty. Thank you. Much better. I can see now. I can't see you, but I can see my screen. I guess that's all that matters. Well, welcome everybody, and I am really grateful you guys are here tonight. We're going to talk tonight about the importance of having a sponsor on our journeys in here as we're working our recovery. Now, any of you in a 12-step right now should have one, or you should be getting encouraged to find one or start noticing and paying attention to the people, the leaders in your share group that can sponsor, and start praying and thinking about who you want to ask. And as a matter of fact, I have to tell you, when I very first started coming to CR, and you got to keep in mind this was like over 12 and a half years ago, when I first started coming here, when I heard this thing sponsor, I'm like, what is a sponsor? What does a sponsor do? How do they help me? Why do I have to have a sponsor? And then I was thinking, why can't I just do this by myself? What is so big deal about a sponsor? So it took me a while. As a matter of fact, it took me almost over a year before I decided to surrender to that part, join a 12-step, and then actually go find a sponsor. And I'm glad I did. It actually was a very, very valuable part of my experience. Probably I wouldn't have gone through and gotten as much out of without them. And so tonight, I hope if any of you are like me, you're fearful or untrusting or not sure, like what's this whole process? Why do I got to do that? Hopefully tonight, by the time I get done with this lesson, you will have a better feel for it. You will feel probably, hopefully, God willing, more comfortable. And if you haven't asked somebody, hopefully you'll start asking. And so that's my goal. The other goal is I hope to answer other questions. Maybe you have found somebody. Maybe you're already working with somebody. Maybe you have some questions and you're not for sure. Can I talk about this? Can I ask about that? Or what do I do? And so hopefully I'll cover enough ground tonight that I will cover a lot of that as well. And so I think this will answer many questions as possible and hopefully help you navigate this process with ease. But the first thing I want to mention about a sponsor is when you think of the word sponsor, think of the word mentor, because they're both the same thing and they're a lot of the same thing. And that's when I think of a mentor, it's easier for me to wrap my head around what a sponsor is if I think of them as a mentor, and using that word is just easier for me. But as a sponsor, a mentor, whichever you want to call it, I don't really care. You could call it either, but there's somebody who's already walked a path before you that you are seeking to help guide you now that you're going on it. So a sponsor is somebody who's already walked this path, done the work, helped others, did everything that was required of them, and now they've done, and we're going to get into what they had to do to be able to sponsor, but I don't want to give it all away right this second, but they've done the work that's necessary in order to help somebody else. And they also share about their own mistakes they made while they were working their recovery. So we can learn from them too, and hopefully learn how to avoid some of the pitfalls that we can run into if we didn't have somebody else helping to guide us. They're also going to listen to you when you read your inventories to them. A lot of you are probably starting to hear the scary inventory word in your 12-step right now. And the first time it can be really scary. And so that's why it's also vital to have a sponsor to help make it a little less scary for you. They will also help you, and you're going to be sharing that inventory with them. So when you're done with your inventory and writing it, that's the person you share it with. So that's why it's also vital to develop that relationship with your sponsor so you can do that. And then they're going to help you when you're done with your 12-step, write your full testimony. So there's a lot a sponsor does to answer questions, to guide you. They're also there to challenge you. They're also there to call you out if they feel like you're lying to them. They're also there to call you out if you're going too fast or going too slow. So they're there to ask questions. So there's a lot they do. So the biggest encouragement I'd like to leave you with tonight, after all I'm going to go through, and there's a lot of information I'm going to throw out at you here, is when picking a sponsor, make sure to pick somebody that you think you will be comfortable enough to open up to grow and trust with, and who you will listen to when they challenge you. Otherwise, if you're just looking for somebody to unload on, to vent on, to download all your struggles and strife, and they try to give you feedback or they try to guide you back to the principles and steps, and you're resistant to it, and you cut them off or shut them down, you're in the wrong program. You're not going to get out of this program what it's meant to be to help you. And so if that's what you're looking for, that's a counselor. That's somebody you go outside of here and go share and unload all your stuff with. We're very structured here. This is a program, and this is to learn how to work on ourselves, to work on our issues, and to work on our issues means replacing our issues, changing the way we've been responding to our circumstances or life or people in our lives. And so it's not going to work if you're not open to them. So I just want to throw that out there. So I also want to tell you, I wouldn't encourage you to attempt this process without a sponsor. You will grow weary, you will quit, you will not get as much out of it, and you will grow tired trying to do this on your own. It's going to be very challenging and a very emotional experience. And so it's so helpful to have a sponsor so you can call up them and they can say, yeah, I did the same thing, or yeah, I felt the same way, or yeah, that was hard for me too. So having somebody who can identify with a lot of what you might be going through can add a lot of comfort to you on your journey. So before we get into tonight's lesson, I first want to begin by going over our principle and step for tonight, because it's the first one that we're now moving into principle 4 and step 4. And principle 4 says, openly examine and confess my faults to myself, to God, and to someone I trust. And it corresponds with the verse, happy are the pure in heart, Matthew 5:8. And step 4, make a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And the corresponding verse to that is, let us examine our ways and test them, and let us return to the Lord. Lamentations 3:40. So principle 4 and step 4, this is the beginning for the next 5 lessons from this lesson is all about inventory. It's all about getting you ready to do your inventory. Then we're going to get into how to do your inventory, what you can write about in your inventory. And so this is a very pivotal and very important part of your journey and your process here. And it's also a part where you will probably gain the most revelation and insight about yourself. So I cannot tell you how important this is, and that's why there's so many lessons just dedicated to step 4, principle 4. And so we're going to be talking about this for the next 5 lessons. And so tonight, though, we're starting with the first and the most important part, which is you shouldn't enter into the inventory writing process or beginning that part of your journey without a sponsor. And that's why we're addressing having a sponsor, so you understand why that's important and how it can help you and benefit you, especially as you get into your inventory writing. And also, the other thing that happens a lot of times with our sponsors and when we write our inventories is we're writing down painful experiences, and probably 99% of the time when we're writing those out, there's experiences we're going to be writing about that we're having to revisit, and we've never told anybody in our life about them. And so your sponsor may be the very first person you ever share a secret with of something you've been through or something you've done that you're holding on to that maybe you feel shame over or whatever it might be. And I can't tell you how powerful and healing it is when we get to share those secrets and we don't have to keep them hidden anymore, and we finally get to tell somebody else. And I believe that this is healing because this is what God tells us in James 5:16. He says to confess your sins to one another and pray for each other so that you may be healed. You know, in Scripture, we're told if we want forgiveness, we ask God. But we're now told if we want healing, we have to tell somebody else. And so I can't tell you how powerful it's going to be in your journey walking through the 12-step program about sharing what you're going through with somebody else. And God tells us that's how we find healing. So it's a critical role. It's an important role. I just can't express that enough. And we're going to get into talking more about it. But all I want to say is accountability is the key that will separate the wishers in life from the action takers that care enough about their future to account for their daily actions. So your sponsor is going to play a critical role in your recovery to help you take account for and be responsible for the actions you have chosen in your life, so you can now face it and deal with it and do what you need to do with it so you can begin the healing process, working through it and letting it go. So tonight, as we jump into the lesson, the first thing I want to address is who can be a sponsor accountability partner. Now, a sponsor is somebody who has completed the 4-step booklets in a 12-step program. They walked through doing all the 12 steps and 8 principles. They wrote their inventory. They read it to their sponsor. They wrote their inventories. They shared it with the group here. Then I required them to go to training, and then the big prize is these fancy dancy badges that all the leaders get to rock around here. This is what lets you know who those people are. Anybody wearing one of these has done all of that. They've been through it, done it, did it, they're still coming back. They're still working on themselves. They're still working on their journey. They're still working on probably new issues, new things that have come up. And they're still here in the program. So those are the people that you want to consider for to be a sponsor. And the one thing I want to encourage you about and make sure I mention to you is if the first person you ask to be your sponsor says no, please be determined not to stop there or to take it personally, because their response is not about you, it is about them. It's about their capacity or their energy or their wisdom, thinking that they may not be the right person or the best person for you on this journey. So if you get it turned down, don't stop there, just please go ask somebody else, because the last thing you will want to have is a sponsor that is overbooked or has too many sponsees who can't give you the time you might need. So please keep asking. Now, accountability partner, that can be anybody. Anybody in this room, anybody in a share group, anybody in your 12-step, anybody new to the program, been here forever in the program, and they don't have to sing like Lionel Richie to be an accountability partner. So it's very low-lying qualifications to be an accountability partner. And I just want to let you know and remind you that the accountability partner's responsibility is to be backup support if your sponsor can't be reached, and they're there to listen and to pray for you. They're not there, and it's not the job of either the accountability partner or sponsor to fix or solve your problems or to be your counselor. If you're looking for that, again, that's not what these roles are designed for. There are no trained counselors or psychologists here. You can add that piece to your recovery program if you want to add it. I know many in here have. I know I have. I know I currently am with a grief counselor. And it's a huge part. It's helping me walk through my pain and help me deal with the issues as they're coming up. And so that's an important part, but that's not what your sponsor accountability partner is here for. And so they're here to help us. We're here to help them, guide them through the process, guide them back to the tools, the principles, the steps, and help them when they get to the inventory, help them with the full testimony, help answer questions, and to be reached out to when they're struggling. And I can't express how important and valuable it is to have both.
Can you bend that mic away?
Is that what it's?
Yeah, that's what.
It's way from too close?
Yeah, it's way too close.
I was wondering. I thought it was my cord. Thank you. So 12 years ago, and this is an example of why it's so important to have both a sponsor and accountability partner. 12 years ago, I had to lead a 12-step group here by myself. Now, I never encouraged that. I don't do that today. But back then, I wasn't the CR leader. I was just somebody new and upcoming, and it was my first time leading a 12-step. I had already completed one, and it was my first opportunity to lead one. And we had very limited leaders. I think I had like 10 or 15 women in this group. And I also agreed not only to lead it alone, because we didn't have enough leaders for me to have a co-leader, but I also agreed to sponsor 2 of the ladies in my group. And this was all fine and good, except midway during the 12-step, I found out that my husband had cancer, and the ladies were at that time in the middle of working on their inventories, and I didn't have a co-leader, so a couple things happened. One, I had to cancel, or not cancel, but close the group for like a month because I couldn't be here during that time. And the other thing was I couldn't help them with their inventories because I wasn't available. I just couldn't be there with them. So they were kind of left to themselves trying to figure out navigating, getting those inventory sheets filled out. But thankfully, these 2 ladies that I happened to be sponsoring in my group, and all the ladies did it with different people, but I'm specifically referring to the ones I was sponsoring, they reached out to each other. They encouraged each other. They helped each other as they wrote down the events from their life and put them into those inventory sheets. And I just can't tell you how grateful I was for that. How grateful I was that they found each other to be accountability partners, and that I was able to deal with what I needed to do with the crisis in my life while they were on that part of their journey. But this experience was very impactful. As a matter of fact, it was so impactful. There's 2 things that I, with everything within me, try never to do anymore. And that is, 1, I tried to never let another 12-step happen without 2 leaders, a leader and a co-leader. So if one person goes down, one person has a crisis, one person gets sick, whatever, there's somebody else who can keep the group going. And the other thing is, I personally will not sponsor anybody unless they have an accountability partner, and it's in my contract, and I want to know who it is, because I want to know if something happens and I can't answer the phone when they might need me, that they can reach out to somebody else. And so that's how critical important it is to me, and I would like to encourage all of you to do the same, because there are times your sponsor will not be reachable and you will need somebody else you can reach out to. So please be sure to have both. All right, so now you know the difference between the two roles. Sponsor, somebody who's been there, done it, still doing it, working on themselves. Accountability partner can be anybody who's just there, again, to support, encourage, and to talk through maybe some of the things you're writing down or working on, and to pray for each other, and just to listen and support each other. Now I'm going to cover really quick some frequently asked questions. These are things over the years I've gotten asked a lot, so I just want to run through them real quick with you because I think this might help address maybe a lot of questions or concerns any of you might have about asking someone to be your sponsor. But the first one, and I think the most important question, is why do we need a sponsor and accountability partner? And it's because, and this is also your first fill-in on your blank, by the way, in your handout, and if you didn't get one, they're on the back table. Sorry, I meant to mention that at the beginning. But the reason for it is biblical. Ecclesiastes 4:9-12 says, "Two are better off than one because together they can work more effectively. If one of them falls down, the other can help him up. But if someone is alone, there is no one to help him. Two people can resist an attack that would defeat one person alone. And together we are stronger and more effective in working our recovery journeys in here. Alone, we are more vulnerable to attacks and to relapse. So alone is what actually got most of us into trouble to begin with. And plus, how many of us have been left alone with our thoughts and discovered how that's a really dangerous place to be? And so if you find yourself there, by the way, run and call your sponsor. But together with somebody else, we can gain feedback and support that can make all the difference for lasting change that we're seeking here in this process. Another question I get asked a lot is, can your spouse be your sponsor accountability partner? Now, I hear a lot of giggling because I'm sure people have had the same experience as me. I love my husband. I appreciate him immensely. But spouses cannot and should not be your sponsor or your accountability partner. And believe me when I tell you this, you don't want them to be. In CR, also, it's a requirement that your sponsor and accountability partners be the same sex as you. So men are with men, women are with women. Now, I do love that I can talk about my discoveries and aspects of my recovery that I'm comfortable with my husband when he or I are wanting to. But we have always given each other space. We've tried not to tell each other what we think the other person should be working on, even though it is super tempting, and this is why you want to avoid it, and this is why you don't want to ask them to be your sponsor accountability partner, because then you're going to give what they think you should be doing. And so I'm just telling you, I want you to avoid strife. I want you to have a peaceful recovery. I don't want it to be filled with tension. And honestly, our spouses are too close, and at times we'll have a hard time being objective with us because they're more emotionally tied to us, and they might try to fix our pain instead of letting us walk through our pain. So there's warning label: don't do it. Don't do it. Don't add more strife into your recovery by relying on a spouse for either of those roles. Another question I get a lot is, what do I do if my sponsor quits or moves away? Well, that will happen. It's happened to me. And it happened to me on multiple occasions. And as a matter of fact, I have had 6 sponsors in the 12 and a half years I have been working on my recovery here in this program. And they're all for different reasons. I did have my very first sponsor that I had for 3 years did quit when she moved away. So, and some others did quit the program for other various reasons, or I changed them for various reasons, and I'll get into that in a moment. But if your sponsor quits or moves away, I believe it is best, this is my suggestion, to thank them for their help, for the progress you made, and let them know you still want to be friends, but that you'll be finding another sponsor who lives here locally, attending and working in your program. You can ask them for support until you find that person to replace them. But I'm going to tell you, if you know they're going to be leaving and moving away or going somewhere else, or they're quitting the program, it will be smarter for you to go find a new sponsor than to try to stay connected with somebody you're not going to see at your program, to stay connected with somebody that you're not going to even know, are they really working it? And they're not going to even know if you're really working it because they're not seeing you. When you see your sponsor here, you see somebody who's saying, this is important to me. I'm still working on myself. And they see you and you see them. And there's some accountability there. So if you have questions, then you can talk to them, and it's a chance to get together and communicate too. So if they quit or move away, my suggestion is to get another one. But stay in touch, stay friends, keep them updated on what you're doing, how your journey's going. Fourth one is, question I get a lot is, what if there's a personality conflict? Hard to believe, but if your sponsee turns out not to be a good fit personality-wise or has struggles because of your scheduling conflicts, you can let them know. You guys can fire each other and you can go find somebody else. Take ownership of your recovery and do what you feel is best for you. But be honest, be loving, let them know that you're going to go find somebody else and thank them for what they did to help you get as far as you did until you go find somebody else. And sometimes we don't mean to do this, but it's our human nature. It's just what happens. But sometimes we're not intentional, but we're going to rub each other the wrong way. It's just how it is. But sometimes we don't discover that we do that till we're involved in having regular communication, like in a sponsor-sponsee relationship. You know, and the thing I just like to tell you is, don't take offense over it. Don't be offended. Just move on to somebody else and know that if that person feels that way, like if they're being rubbed the wrong way or triggered a lot by you or something, it is better for them to go off to somebody else than to try to force it in a relationship with you because they happened to ask you and they were just afraid to say something. I will tell you, I have been fired over the years multiple times, and I appreciate every single time when the ladies come and tell me this, because I know I have a crazy schedule. I know my time is super limited, and I know I can't always meet the needs of the people that I have sponsored. And then last year, after my daughter passed away, I had a few more move on because I just was in the midst of a crisis in this journey that I'm on that I just emotionally didn't have the capacity. And so I'm grateful that they told me, and it shows me that they take this role very seriously, and finding the right guide for them is so important to them. And I don't mind being fired over that. I love knowing that they found somebody else who could give them what they needed. So another question I get asked a lot is, should my sponsor be older than me? And I want to tell you right now, age doesn't matter. Age doesn't matter. What matters is relatable experience. Finding someone who's gone through something similar as you is more important. I've had sponsors younger than me, older than me, same age as me over the years. So age doesn't really matter. Relating to their journey does. I've changed sponsors several times, and a lot of times I've based it off of my recovery issue. I had some time there where I was working on past abuse, so I found a sponsor that specifically was ahead of me in that area of working abuse. I've had multiple years where I worked on my fears and false beliefs and control from codependency, so I changed sponsors and went and looked for somebody that was ahead of me on working on their codependency. And so sometimes I changed it because I wanted to, and I wanted a sponsor that specifically was relatable to what I was identifying and working on at that time. So age should not be based off of how old they are, doesn't matter. But the age you should be looking at and considering when you're looking at a sponsor, you should be asking yourselves, are they A, available, G, growing, and E, have experience that's similar to yours? That's the age you look for, available, growing, experience. That's what matters, and that is what you want in a sponsor, and how old they are doesn't matter. The next question I get asked a lot is, how do I know what is expected of me as a sponsee? Well, when you ask somebody to be your sponsor, I'll kind of give you how it might play out. It might play out this way. You might ask somebody and they might reply, or by asking you, what are you working on? What's your issue? Because they're trying to figure out, is it relatable to what they've worked on? Then they're going to probably say, I'm going to go home, I'm going to think about this and pray about it. And chances are they might even go home and call their sponsor about it and ask their sponsor, do you think I'm ready for this, or I can handle this, or I should do this, or I have this many sponsees already, should I add another? And so sometimes they may go get input, but they also want to pray about it. They want to know that they feel led to be your sponsor just as much as you feel led to asking them. And so that's so important. And if they decide they're feeling led, then the next thing they're going to do is give you a contract. And in that contract, it's going to have all the ins and outs and ups and downs and what's expected of a sponsee-sponsor relationship. It's going to tell you how you could fire them, how they could fire you. It's going to tell you what they expect and need from you to make this relationship work. And you're going to review it. I know when I give it to my sponsees, I ask them to review it. We go over it together. I ask them if they need any clarity, if they have any questions. And if there's some expectations in my particular contract they can't meet, we'll talk about it. And then we'll decide, I'll decide if it's something that we can make a compromise on and do differently, or if I just need to encourage them to go find somebody else who can meet a particular need they might have that I can't. So it's the contract will make a big difference, and I love having it. I feel like it sets everybody up to get off on the right foot going forward together and beginning that connection and relationship. So ask for the contract. If they don't automatically give it to you, be sure to ask them for that so you can know what your expectations are. Another question I get a lot is, how long does this relationship continue for? And the answer to that question should actually be in your contract already, because it's going to change over time. You know, starting out, like, and I'll give my example for what I typically do. Starting out, I'll have in my contract, we'll meet face-to-face every 2 weeks. And then up until the inventory is time, and it's time for them to read me their inventory. And once we set a time and they read me their inventory, I will then set up the meetings to be once a month. I start what I call the weaning phase. And it makes the time we meet a little bit further apart. And I don't do this to be mean or because I don't like them or I don't want to see them as much anymore, but it's because I'm trying to help challenge them to go the next step in their journey from waiting to talk to me at our scheduled meetings to having a little bit longer space. And I tell them, reach out to me now. You're struggling, I expect you to reach out. I don't want you to wait till our monthly meeting to tell me, oh, I relapsed over and over, and I did the same stupid things over and over, and I'll be like, well, why didn't you call me? That's the whole point of learning how to have a sponsor, building that trust, that rapport, so then we can pick up the phone and feel comfortable enough to call them, to tell them, I'm struggling, because they already know we struggle, right? We've already been sharing with them. We've already been getting to know them. We read them our inventories. They know what our struggles are. They know what we're going through. So it's just to help us learn how to put into practice this tool of reaching out. All right, so hopefully after hearing all these things, those questions and answers, that helps answer maybe some questions you might have about the things I get asked the most. Now we're going to talk about, and if you have any other questions that I didn't cover tonight, I know I didn't cover them all, but feel free to ask me afterwards. But now I'm going to jump into what are the qualities you should be looking for in a sponsor when you're going to share groups and listening, and to other people share and what they're working on. The first thing you should be looking for is for someone who can set an example as a servant leader. Sponsors are people that should be living out of their recovery by serving here in some capacity. You should see a desire in them to want to help others, and they're here each week, like I said, working the program. So they're setting an example for you. This is important. Being at big group meetings is important. Going to share groups is important. That's important to find a sponsor who is taking this seriously, that they are doing and participating in everything and not skipping parts of it or missing parts of it, because that's your example. So that's why it's important that you pick somebody who sets the right example to help you get the most out of this process. They won't be perfect, but their journeys will demonstrate progress. And our sponsors will do the best they can to listen to us as long as their sponsees are being open and honest about their struggles. Otherwise, if your sponsor thinks you're lying to them or not being completely honest, they're going to call you out on it, and that's their job. You're wasting their time if you're trying to spend time with them or talk to them or whatever, and you're not telling them really what's happening or what you're doing. And so they want to help you. They're there to help guide you, but you have to want to help to change. Colossians 3:9 and 10 says, do not lie to each other. Since you have taken off your old self with its practices and put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge in the image of its creator. That's so important. That's what we're doing here. We're learning how to peel off the old self. We're learning how to replace our old practices with new practices so we can grow and looking more and more, becoming more like Jesus as we live out our lives here. Some of us have been lying about what we've been doing for a very long time. We have put ourselves through the ringer, and we're finally ready to come clean and change how we've been doing. A good sponsor is going to be able to relate and have the ability to share their old practices too, and tell you what God did and how God helped them replace them and the new ways God has helped them to live them out. The next quality we need to look for in a sponsor is finding one that expresses how their changes came from the power of God working in them and not from themselves. One way you can tell this is, does the person show humility in the recovery journey? Do they speak openly and honestly about their flaws and the mistakes and the struggles they made and about how God is helping to change them through this process? When we're still operating out of our own power, we're going to continue to relapse into our addictions and our compulsive behaviors. But the only thing that is key to change that, it begins with humility. Humility is the key to change. That's what helps to open our hearts to hear from God and find the support we will need from our sponsors and accountability partners as we begin making changes. 1 Corinthians 2:5 says, so that your faith might not rest on human wisdom, but on God's power. We are not resting our recoveries on our sponsors, nor are we resting our recoveries on our human wisdom that can be tainted by our fears and limiting beliefs. Relying on God's power means asking for his power to give us what we need to keep us working on our recoveries, even when we don't like it, even when it's uncomfortable, and even when we're tempted to run back to our old ways. To fight those urges, we're going to need someone who will encourage us to stay the course and not to give in to them. The next quality you should be looking for in a sponsor is someone that's open to share their recovery journey. Sponsors should be keeping it real with you, should be sharing honestly about their past struggles with the new struggles. Sometimes, on occasion, I've seen sponsors make great strides in their recovery to only go back to their old ways. Proverbs 10:9 says, whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but whoever takes a crooked path will be found out. And sadly, I can say I've seen some leaders over the 12 years I have been in this program do some things that have broken my heart and greatly saddened me after having much success in this program. No one knew about what they were doing until they totally blew it or were exposed or they finally fessed up. And the truth is, we can all pretend we're okay when we come here. We can try to hide what we're doing outside these doors when we leave here on Tuesday nights. But I'll tell you right now, eventually our sins, our mistakes, they will catch up with us. God will expose them in his light. We may fool each other in here for a time, but God already knows what we're doing, been doing, what we are doing. And eventually other people will too. And I'm not beating up anybody in this room. I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad about what they're working on or what they're going through or what they might be doing outside of here. Because I want you to know if you have a sponsor, you now have somebody you can reach out to. You can start making changes that you don't have to live like that anymore. And if this happens to you, and maybe this happens to your sponsor, where they're stumbling and they're relapsing and they're finally fessing up and admitting to it, I want to tell you, if that happens, go get a new sponsor, because that sponsor needs to focus on themselves now. If they're struggling with their recovery that much, if they're relapsing that much, it's better to let them be by themselves and work on themselves right now, and you find another sponsor who's further along in the recovery process and not struggling. So that way you can get the help you need from somebody who's in a better place at that time. I want you to know it is never too late to come back, make changes, and get on the right path again. And so I just want to encourage you, if you're struggling, if you've been hiding something, admit to it, own it, get a sponsor, start working on it, because that's what we're here for, and that's why we ask for people to be our sponsor so we can help, with God's help, have lasting change in our lives. The next thing we need to look for in a sponsor is someone who is non-judgmental. And this is critical when we sponsor others, to make them not feel judged for what they've gone through or what they've done. And I want you to know, here in CR, this is a judgment-free zone. If you find yourself, though, as a sponsor or sponsee, judging the other person, that's really more of a reflection of something going on in you than them. And it's something that needs further evaluation and something possibly to work on, something you're projecting from possibly your own pain, maybe something you haven't forgiven yourself for, that you judge yourself for, and you project it on other people thinking you're trying to hold them to the standard you want to hold yourself to, but you weren't able to. So there's a lot of reasons why we get judgmental, and I'm not going to get into that because this is not a sermon on that, or a lesson on that, but I just want you to know, if that happens and you find yourself judging each other, talk about it. Find out if you can get to the root of it. Find out what's going on. Find out if you might need to go find a different sponsor, or if you might need to release a sponsee to go find another sponsor. Be honest. Just talk about it. When you're also have to know, when you're working with somebody with relatable experience that's helping you walk through the journey to work on something you worked on, they might trigger you. And that can make you judgmental. That can make it hard for you. And so it can be an opportunity for you to learn and grow if you're able to, and if you're able to keep your emotions separate from that relationship that when you're working with your sponsee. But you'll know best. You're the judge. You have to be the judge of that for yourself. And if you need help or you're not sure, you need clarity, you can come talk to me or Digger. But I think most of you have the ability to figure that out and know if you're struggling with being judgmental, and if you might need to move on or let that person go to find a different sponsor that can help them while you work on yourself and see and figure out why are you doing that way. Because, and the reason why we don't want to be judgmental, Matthew 7:1-2 says, don't judge others or you will be judged. You'll be judged in the same way that you judge others, and the amount you give to others will be given to you. Pretty big warning about being judgmental. And so I just want to encourage you, don't judge each other. If it happens, talk about it, pray about it, take steps that you both think is best for the relationship. Another thing you want to see in a sponsor is someone who is still growing in their relationship with God. Sponsors need to be living out Principle 8 regularly. We need to be active in our own recoveries, bringing to others both by our example and our words what God has done to help us through this program. Seeing your sponsor, that's why I'm saying seeing your sponsor face to face each week in here in CR is so important, because these examples of what they're doing and what you hear them sharing and what you hear them say in share groups, or if they do their testimonies or if they're coming up to get chips, is going to be powerful in helping you see what steps you might have to take or where you might be a year from now. And so it's to encourage you. So you want to have a sponsor that's continuing to work on themselves so you can be encouraged by their progress as you're working on yourself. Colossians 1:10 says, then the way you will live will always honor and please the Lord, and your lives will produce every kind of good fruit. All the while you will grow as you learn to know God better and better. Pick someone who shares openly and is helping you to learn from their experiences how you can grow to know God better and better through this process. The next thing you want to find in a sponsor is someone who can be objective. And this sometimes can become very challenging in this process. I have seen many sponsor and sponsees become like best friends, like BFFs by the time they're done with their 12-step. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can affect your ability as a sponsor to remain objective as you continue to sponsor them. You may find yourself becoming more emotionally reactive or defensive to their struggles. And this can make things messier and more difficult and more challenging when you're sponsoring them. So if it happens, talk to your sponsee about it. Maybe you have to change the dialogue. Maybe you ask them not to be so graphic. I mean, I don't know. You have to figure out what you need and ask for their help and invite them in to be a part of that to help you so you can continue sponsoring them or figure out if they may need to find somebody else. But two things. This has happened to me. I've had to do this in the past. And this is what a couple ways I've handled it. One of them was you can find another person to sponsor you instead and keep your friendship going and just take out the sponsor side, keep the friendship going, to hang out, be best buds and BFFs outside of here, and not have that person be your sponsor because they won't be able to be as objective. So that's one way you could deal with it. Or you can try to make it work by very clearly defining when you're wearing your sponsor hat and talking to them sponsor stuff, and when that hat comes off and you put on your friendship hat, and then you get to be BFFs and talk about whatever. That one's a lot harder. That one's a little harder to be more clear sometimes. And so you have to figure out with the person you're sponsoring. Is that workable? Is that doable? What do they think? What do they like about it or don't like about it? Is it, and do what works for you guys. Do what works for you guys. There's no hard, fast rule about that. Just figuring it out. Communication. If you hear anything I'm talking about tonight is communicate. Talk to each other. Tell each other where you're at, what's going on, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what's happening, and I can tell you, it will help the sponsor-sponsee relationship grow tremendously. 1 Thessalonians 4:12 says, so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders, and so that you will not be dependent on anybody. I want you to know it's not your sponsor's job to work your recovery for you. They can't work this program for us. If they did, that would make our sponsees dependent on us. Plus, the sponsee would miss out on the great joy they would experience when they see God helping them through this progress by replacing old destructive patterns of behavior and addictions with healthy new choices. And it's exciting to watch and see how God delivers our sponsees from their destructive ways, and seeing how the support we put around ourselves helps keep us moving forward and not giving up in this process. Plus, our sponsees will be given the opportunity, once they have gotten through to the other side, to see the journey, to see what God taught them, showed them, helped them overcome, to now have an opportunity to witness and encourage others, to other outsiders that may be looking for a safe place they can work on themselves. So it's a big part of the journey. And sorry, sponsees, we can't do it for you. We can't write your inventory for you. We can't go to the meetings or your 12-step for you. You got to do those things. You got to do the homework. We can't attend share groups for you. You got to show up and participate. And we can't be here for you on Tuesday nights to remind you how to apply what we're learning in these tools that you're gaining as you're participating in the 12-step program right now. So I just want to encourage you to invest yourself and participate and surrender to the process and what it asks you to do. The last thing you should ask a potential sponsor is, are they reachable? That's a great question to ask somebody that you want to be your sponsor. What is their availability? If your sponsor life is too busy or has a crisis that came in it like mine did, that's consuming their time, then you should just ask them or tell them that you need to find another sponsor. You can ask them first if it's really, if you should move on. But if you feel like you need it because you're in the middle of your inventories and you're just like, I'm going to go find a different sponsor that can help me because I'm struggling and I need help right now, that's fine too. I want you to do what's best for you. Your sponsor's going to understand and appreciate. Just communicate and let them know. This is actually going to show growth and maturity when you take ownership of your journey by asking this. So you can ensure that you have a sponsor who has time to be available. Also, don't take it personal. Once again, if you get fired as a sponsor for this reason, as I've shared, I've been fired over this reason. And it's probably been one of the main reasons. But just know the person you may have started with on your journey guiding you in this process may not be the person you finish with, or may not be the same person you're with 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road if you're still coming back and working on yourself through this program here. So don't take it personal. Honestly, I love it when I hear that my sponsee took responsibility to go out and find another sponsor who could meet their needs. That shows they're hungry and desire to get the guidance they need to get the most out of this process. Proverbs 15:14 says, "A wise person is hungry for the truth, while a fool feeds on trash." And we all need a sponsor that is available to guide us and tell us the truth by pointing out when we're feeding on the trash from our past. If you're hungry, find somebody who can help feed you truth through this process instead of feeding on the old ways you used to live. All right, so I got through it fast. Well, that was still a long lesson. But anyway, thanks for being so patient with me. And if you have any other questions I didn't cover, let me know. We're all going to stand up and do the Serenity Prayer. But before we do that, I just want to let you know, in your handout, there are some home application questions. If you want to use those in your share group, you can. It's just to get you talking about it. If you haven't already found a sponsor or asked somebody, maybe it'll help encourage you to get that process going. So let's stand and say the Serenity Prayer so we can head out to share groups.